Hey gang, Gene Lyons here. As you're listening to this podcast, Big D, the King Bee, and I are on our way to beautiful New Orleans, Louisiana to celebrate my bachelor party. We wish we could take you all along with us, and although we can't, we are going to be posting our adventures to Instagram in the form of a photo challenge, a few excursion videos, and who knows what else we'll find along the way. If at any point while you're watching us do the things we do, you think Gene could use a beer in his hand, or Big D looks like he needs a whiskey, you can take care of us by going to Liquor for Lions on Venmo. That's LIQUOR, the number 4, and then Lions, LYONS. Drop us a couple bucks, and we'd love to have a cold one on you. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get out of your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you'd like to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel for Shat the Movies, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, when wonderful listeners commission a film, they come in a few different categories. There's usually like the great film everybody knows about, a personal favorite, or the film like tonight, the film that I had no idea existed, the one that was never on my radar. And without the podcast and the generous commission of David D., I never would have watched it. So tonight, folks, we're going to go on a very special journey. We're going to click our heels together and wish 3 times that there's no place like home, as we return back to a destroyed Oz in the Emerald City and review the 1985 dark fantasy, Return to Oz.
And David D wrote in and said, I'm commissioning the 1985 classic childhood fantasy film that has given an entire generation of kids nightmares of cabinets full of disembodied heads and weird dudes in makeup with wheels for hands. Return to Oz. Return to Oz is a 1985 dark fantasy released by Walt Disney Pictures as an unofficial sequel to 1939's The Wizard of Oz, borrowing from L. Frank Baum's early 20th century Oz novels, mainly The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. In the plot, an insomniac Dorothy returns to the land of Oz to find it has been conquered by the wicked Gnome King and his accomplice, Princess Mombi. Return to Oz was released in theaters on June 21st, 1985. It performed poorly at the box office, grossing $11 million in the U.S. on a $28 million budget, and received mixed reviews, with critics praising the effects and performances, but criticizing the dark content and twisted visuals, with many deeming it inferior to the original film. It performed well outside the U.S. and has since acquired a cult following from fans of the Oz books for being more faithful to L. Frank Baum's works. It received an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. Now, this one kind of blew my mind because after watching the movie, I can't tell why it failed in the U.S. because this feels like it's in the same vein as The Dark Crystal or like Labyrinth. In the 80s, kids' movies just sometimes got really fucking dark, and I like that.
Oh, yes. It totally made me think of my childhood and why maybe we're fucked up as a generation. It is dark, but it felt like just a run-of-the-mill, like you said, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, or even the cartoons like The Secret of Nymph. That shit's dark and creepy. I think the visuals of the poster, it threw me off when we first talked about it. It doesn't look like anything that is faithful to the material or the earlier film. I think that hurt it, and that's why a lot of people never went to see it.
Now, David, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm the odd duck who's only seen The Wizard of Oz once, never rewatched it. I never read any of the books. And I, like Big D, didn't know Return to Oz even existed prior to this commission. But the more I researched the movie before watching it, the more connections I found to my own life. My neighborhood queer coffee shop, Brick Road, is Wizard of Oz themed. The Wheelers are basically a moped gang, so I relate to that. And the movie stars my childhood crush, Fairuza Balk, whose birthday happens to be the day we're recording today.
Oh, happy birthday. And I think also it has a vibe from the trailer that it's a made-for-TV movie. I always thought when I saw the box years later that this was some like a low budget, hey, we're going to do it for TV. It'll be a Sunday and a Monday. And it wasn't. It was an honest surprise. I don't want to spoiler alert here, people, but this was one of the few times that I've been really surprised doing this podcast.
Well, let's see if we can find some flaws in the marketing and hit the trailer.
This summer, Walt Disney Pictures presents a motion picture fantasy adventure beyond your fondest imagination. You'll be transported miraculously back to the enchanted land of Oz, that magical kingdom beloved by young and old for generations.
It's just a yellow brick.
No, Belina, you don't understand. This was the Yellow Brick Road.
You'll share with Dorothy Gale the shock of finding everything mysteriously changed.
What's happened to everybody?
And you'll delight with her discovery of 4 wonderful new friends who band together against a wicked queen and the dreaded Gnome King. This is the Oz you haven't seen before, and this is the Oz you'll want to visit again and again. From Walt Disney Pictures comes a whole new world of entertainment.
Why don't we just fly back to Kansas?
Return to Oz.
In 1899, Dorothy Gale is taken to a sanatorium by her worried Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, who believe her obsession with the land of Oz is a sign of delusion. Once there, Dr. Worley and his assistant, Nurse Wilson, plan to administer electrotherapy to Dorothy, but lightning causes a power failure. When a mysterious girl helps Dorothy escape, Nurse Wilson chases them into a river where Dorothy floats away on a chicken coop.
So I just want to set the tone here, everybody. We know the first movie. It's a classic. It's whimsical. It's bright. It's upbeat. It's a musical. There's singing. There's dancing. This movie is very different, and you notice it right off the bat. And one of the things I wasn't expecting, because the cover art and the poster looked absolutely amateurish, there is a quality to the set design and the characters in this that I did not expect. If this was done today, we would have everything in front of a green screen or ILM's The Volume, what they shoot The Mandalorian in, and Disney uses on all their shows. It's simple, it's fast. This, they took the time. Everything was practical. Dorothy's house, when she finds the original house from The Wizard of Oz, they stumble upon it. They recreated that shack. It has the exact same roof shingles. It's beautiful. It's in it for 30 seconds. Tik-Tok, the robot soldier we're going to get to, his design, it looks awesome. It's steampunk. He's like a wind-up toy. And he honestly, to me, looked like he was made of brass. He's got his instructions like riveted to his back. This shit is coming to life. And I wish Labyrinth had put this much time into the quality of what ended up on screen.
Well, I'm not going to debate Labyrinth with you, but we recently saw the Muppet movie, and Muppets have a ton of imagination. There's a ton of creativity that goes into them, and they have just distinct touches. Disney does the same thing, and it's very, very different. Both quality, but a very different approach to these fantastic characters. And Disney's touches were all over this thing. I mean, those special little details that are just designed to elicit an emotional response from the characters. Tik-Tok has these inexplicable, like big green eyes, and they can cry. And he's got just this little mustache that twitches when he's talking. The design is really fantastic. And I was hoping that all the characters in this movie would have this kind of quality, but 3 key ones, they totally dropped the ball on. The Tin Woodsman, not so great. The Cowardly Lion looks like he's missing a few chromosomes. And then there's Scarecrow. Scarecrow is the king of Oz. Like, he's the king of the Emerald City. And talk about a downgrade from the original Wizard of Oz. This Scarecrow looks terrible.
He looks like a Chuck E. Cheese, like a member of the band. It is bootleg Six Flags. It is like a homemade Mardi Gras float. It's terrible. The lion doesn't even move. It doesn't look like he articulates. He doesn't talk. It's like a stuffed lion from F.A.O. Schwartz. Like, it's bad.
And I understand the actors who were in the original Wizard of Oz may have not been available or even alive to be doing these roles, but there's a thing called makeup. You can put people in makeup and make them look similar to, you should be able to achieve the quality that you got in 1939 is all I'm saying.
I think they had a couple different design teams. The A team, they said, hey, go work on TikTok. You go do the Wheelers. And the rest of you, the guy in the back, the intern, do the lion, do the Scarecrow.
I get it now. This is Disney trolling MGM. Your characters fucking suck. Here you go. Oh, you want a cowardly lion? Here you go.
I'll give you a fucking disabled lion. I'll give you a lion who can't even talk. Yeah. But Gene, you don't even know this because you don't have kids. And I think any other parent who would see this movie, Disney now, you know that they're a bit derivative, that they're turning out all these live action versions of their classic films. I could not be the only parent who saw this. There's a scene in here, folks, where there's a character we're going to meet later who lands and his head goes on upside down. I said, fuck, do not do it. Do not do, hey, what are you guys standing on the ceiling? That is directly from Frozen. Olaf has the exact same thing happen to him. I know somebody was watching this movie.
That's just an homage. It's an homage to the Return to Oz.
Yeah.
Big D, you mentioned I'm not a parent, and you're absolutely right, but I think I could do a little bit better than Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, because my response would be, yeah, cool, Dorothy, you went to Oz. Here's a journal, maybe some finger paints, like express yourself. Tell us about it. No. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry are like, yeah, so we're going to leave you overnight with Dr. Shocktopus, and he zaps kids' brains overnight during storms. Everything about this place is a red flag. If I'm Aunt Em and he's like, this is a little electrotherapy machine. See, it's got a little face. There's its eyes and there's its mouth. And what's this? It's a tongue. Now we're going to hook you up to it.
Yeah, but back then kids weren't kids. They were just smaller labor forces. You need Dorothy to get her shit together. She's got to get out there and help build the house and work in the fields.
Disagree. There's some grizzled Civil War veteran who wants a pretty little bride. He'll take her in any condition. She's going to be fine. She'll be just fine.
That's what I was thinking as they strapped her down. And they're like, now you just agree with us. Do what we say. And I'm like, oh, this is not what Dorothy needs right now.
Or she could just have some valiant young rascal come and rescue her from her master, like Young Guns. China!
Some rascal.
Dorothy awakens in Oz with Bellina, a talking chicken. Following a damaged yellow brick road, they find the Emerald City in ruins and its citizens turn to stone. They are attacked by the Wheelers, people with wheels instead of hands and feet. Tik-Tok, a mechanical soldier, saves them and explains that the Scarecrow, the King of Oz, told him to await Dorothy's return. They travel to Princess Mombi's castle to find out where Scarecrow is.
Okay, so in the first film, the Emerald City, the entire Oz, it's beautiful, it's enchanted, it's wonderful, it's filled with glorious creatures. Dorothy goes back, this shit is this is like devastated. The Emerald City looks like Iraq. It is really, really bad. There's nobody around. There's been something really heavy that's gone down. So I'm thinking in my head, there's got to be some big force out there that could devastate Oz, because the Wicked Witch of the West, she's got magic. She's got a couple standing forces. She can command animals. She commanded the wolves to defeat the Tin Man. Then I think the crows beat the Scarecrow. The bees defeated the Tin Man and the Scarecrow together. Then the wolves and crows and bees were defeated. Then she's got human slave soldiers, the Winky Guards, you know them, the she's got those guys. They got those giant multi-bladed spears. They're formidable. They look disciplined. She's got an aviation asset, the flying monkeys. These fuckers, when you tell them, when the Wicked Witch says, hey, go catch Dorothy, go catch the Tin Man, they do it. They fly out there. They swarm in sheer numbers. They pick people up. They're terrifying. You know that monkeys and apes, they could tear your face off now. Just them flying around. With these two forces together, the bees, the wolves, I'm thinking what could take down Oz and cause this devastation? I don't think what we eventually got lived up to the Wicked Witch of the West.
Well, I mean, the Gnome King himself, he's a pretty powerful sorcerer, but what we see initially, the initial force that's occupying the Emerald City is the Wheelers, and they're very memorable. They're very 80s. Like, the best way I could describe them if you haven't seen this movie is imagine like the balding, skinny keyboardist from any 80s synth band, but he also works part-time in an electronics store, and then color his balding head pink and replace his hands and feet with wheels. Again, nothing wrong with the design from a visual standpoint. They roll around, they're giggling, they're threatening Dorothy. But what can they actually do? Like you mentioned, Big D, the Winky Guards, they got spears. The flying monkeys, like you said, monkeys can tear your fucking face off and they're flying. These guys, they don't really wheel like fast enough to run you over. And even if they did, they're running you over with the weight of a skinny man. They can't grab you because they don't have hands. They don't have any weapons. 20 of them were defeated by Tik-Tok just spinning around with his fist.
You could defeat them with a set of stairs. That's all you need to defeat them. This to me felt like a 90s video of like, hey, the new fad is inline skating, rollerblades. And you see people down like with cones. It felt very, very dated. It was like if you go to Universal Studios and they will have the street performers doing some horrible like futuristic street parade or even Cirque du Soleil when they get people, because they're not just on wheels. They have like stilts. So they're super tall and you can tell they're not agile. There's a section of Oz, which is called the Deadly Desert. If you touch the sand, you will be turned to like dust yourself. The Wheelers can't even go near it. They need a nice paved road and they need some smooth terrain. These guys are not a great military force.
Well, say what you will about Return to Oz, but this misstep on the Wheelers doesn't mean that the people making this film didn't care. A lot of care went into that design. They got these helmets, like when their heads are down, it looks like there's another face. They got the long tails of their coats that kind of cover their hindquarters as they're scooting around. They have this like cackle that's very, very memorable, that squeaking of the wheels. A lot of care went into them. And you can say what you will about Return to Oz, but you cannot say they didn't care. And most 80s movies, for example, if they have like a talking animal, in this case, it's a talking chicken, right? They would simply film the horse or the chicken or whatever on the set, and then they dub over a voice. If they're getting really extravagant, they might do some like peanut butter, like Mr. Ed sort of situation. But that is not good enough for Disney. They had Bellina, the talking chicken, and they said, fuck it. We need an animatronic chicken for close-ups and dialogue. And I started to notice Bellina seemed oddly familiar. There was like this folksy comedy to her. She would always be like just commenting on the events of the movie, filterless, essentially. And I realized, oh my God, this is the voice of a 60-something grandma. Holy shit, this is Sarah's mom. This is every grandma in Michigan is represented by Bellina in this movie.
But they had to put in the time because she, from the instant she gets there, she's a fucking chicken. But yet everybody in this magical land of flying monkeys, armies, wheelies, like fucking robot soldiers is like, a chicken? Oh no, there's a chicken. Did you tell them about the chicken? I'm like, shit, chickens have got to have some superpower in us.
So Big D, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but Father of the Bride, I mean, there's a precedent set here. You are the one on the podcast most likely to chuckle at a, let's say a dad joke.
Yeah.
So the chicken thing, I found it distasteful. I was very annoyed by it by about the third mention of the chicken. How did it sit with you?
Well, the fact that the chicken was like a formidable foe.
Fact that people kept reacting in the same way to mentions of chickens. Chicken! And then everyone would kind of freak out.
I thought it was annoying. I wanted to know.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't think it was funny.
I thought I was being unfair, perhaps.
No, it wasn't like they were like, hey, a talking chicken. Oh, my goodness. No, it was like it was like, Superman. Superman only gets a power when you put him in Earth's sun. I thought maybe you take a chicken to Oz and some shit's going to happen. She's going to say like, thunder, thunder, ho, hold up her little claw, and she's going to turn into like a thunderbird. I was waiting for some metamorphosis or transformation to happen. Other than people threatening to cook her, sorry, folks, there's no superpowers.
Did you watch this movie with Emma?
No, I knew.
Oh.
You told me. You warned me and said, hey, it's dark. I thought about it, and then I thought it would, she would have nightmares. She'd be terrified.
I was going to say, I just wondered if this was the one thing they left in there for kids. Like the one part of Return to Oz is for children is the chicken joke.
No.
Everything else is for adults and nightmares.
No.
Speaking of nightmares, Mombi, a vain princess with a collection of wearable heads, reveals that the Gnome King, who is responsible for the devastation of Oz, holds Scarecrow at his mountain. She imprisons the group in a tower, intending to take Dorothy's head for her collection. Dorothy meets Jack Pumpkinhead, who explains he was brought to life by Mombi's powder of life. Dorothy steals the powder to construct a flying creature from furniture and the head of a gump, a moose-like animal, which flies them across the deadly desert to the Gnome King's mountain, pursued by Mombi and the Wheelers.
Okay, so people have already told you this is not a children's movie, even though it was marketed by it and even though Disney made this. But Mombi is a fucked up villain. She's essentially a middle-aged woman who's collecting younger women, more beautiful women's heads. She's using them as like a collection of fashion accessories. They're like handbags. She lives in this castle. She's got all of her handbag heads in display cases along the giant corridors. And it is terrifying. It's a disturbing visual image in this vacant castle. I'm an adult and I'm scared. I'm imagining kids. She grabs Dorothy and she's like looking at her head and she pulls it up and she says, "You will be rather attractive one day. Not that beautiful, but you understand, but you'll have this certain prettiness different from my other heads. I believe I'll lock you in my tower for years." She's putting her up there to grow her head, to cut it, and to put it on her own, and when she finally catches, she's going to try to go through this whole thing. She's going to steal a key to get the powder of life to bring Gump's head together. And one of the heads starts screaming. I became unnerved. I was like sitting back. It's like the scene in Friday the 13th with Jason Voorhees, where you walk into the shrine and Jason's put his mother's head on the table with a ring of candles. There's a headless body chasing this little girl down the hallway, and all these heads are screaming, "Dorothy Gale, Dorothy Gale." It's not a pretty image.
Mombi was the high point of the movie for me. Everybody who had written me about this movie when they found out we were doing it for the podcast was like sending me clips of the head gallery or Mombi just doing Mombi shit. The gallery of heads was terrifically executed. I cannot stress this enough. This
Awesome.
is 80s technology. It looks great. And you're right, Big D. She is legit scary. And when Dorothy first shows up at Mombi's castle, she goes in very politely, as is Dorothy's way. And it takes a little while before Mombi shows her true colors as a head collector. When she does, Tik-Tok, the little robotic army man, he rushes to fight Mombi. He wants to rescue Dorothy. But of course, he runs out of action because Tik-Tok has essentially 3 keys. One that's wound up for his thought, one you have to wind up for his speech, and then one you have to wind up for his action. And so to be fully functional, he needs all those wound up. So he goes to fight Mombi, and he used his last action wind up to fight the Wheelers. So he's kind of all out of juice. How do you forget to wind up the only fighter in your squad? And Tik-Tok's voice is still functioning, so he hasn't used up all of that wind up. Why doesn't he say, "Hey, Dorothy, feeling a little tired after that last fight? Could you wind me up, girl?" Instead, he's left absolutely defenseless.
No, but this is his own fault. When we meet him, he acknowledges that he wound down on his own, that it was like purgatory. First, his motion stopped, but his brain kept working. It's his own fault. And it's the fault of whoever designed him as a weapon system. Dorothy's a child, and it takes her about 10 minutes to be like, "Wow, I think they should have made you so you could wind yourself up." Yes, she's not a weapons manufacturer, but she realizes the wind-up key should be in the front so he could wind himself up. And the only answer, Gene, is maybe this army was created. It's an artificial intelligence. Maybe they were afraid of like a robot revolution. This was a fail-safe. Let's put the kill switch in the back of them. If they try to revolt, we can just leave them unwound and they can't overthrow the Oz government.
No, but this is the thing is I just solved this puzzle though. He can't wind himself up because that would be creating a perpetual motion machine. The energy required to wind him up would be expended by him winding himself up.
So in a world with flying monkeys and fucking magic emeralds,
I don't make the rules,
and
man.
Enchantment and like
I don't make the
shooting
rules.
fireballs. They're worried about conservation of energy.
Yeah, or this is the Oz version of placing explosive in Westworld hosts' spines.
Also, where's the rest of them? Were there more of them?
No, he is the army. It's just him.
He's the only one.
Yeah,
I thought he was
the
like-
army of Oz.
Oh, I thought that was just like they were just speaking figuratively. I thought like he was a member, like they all spoke of themselves as one. Like, we are the army of Oz.
Nah, it's just him.
I was expecting a copper graveyard of just dead and like winding mechanisms and springs and whatever. He looks like a giant like circular boiler with spring legs, and he looks pretty good. You know, there's probably some smaller actor in there like stumbling around like R2-D2, but it looked pretty good, people. But I'm going to take a step back and apologize for something I've said recently. In our review of The Craft, Fairuza Balk, I gave her a lot of shit. She is a strange looking adult. She's kinky. She's weird. I said she had limited acting chops. But Dorothy Gale, this is her as a child. I don't know. How old do you think she is, Gene, here? Is she 11, 10, 11, somewhere around that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, listen, I'm not a parent. You know better than I do. I would say 10. Yeah.
And she, folks, she's wonderful. She's delightful. She looks like she could be on Little House on the Prairie. Her little pigtails. She's got this like innocence on her face. Dorothy's exceptionally polite. She's brave. And given the circumstances, there's a giant 9-foot tall talking pumpkin with a jack-o'-lantern head who keeps calling her mom. This would scare the shit out of any kid. There's a talking purple, like green moose head that they're calling Gump. And she's so damn sweet. She's vulnerable. She's innocent. And I could not help but find myself thinking, what has happened between point A, where she is a child actor, she's playing in this very serious movie where she's acting like everything is normal, and that makes it believable because her reactions aren't like, oh, look, it's a talking pumpkin. Oh my God. She's like, hello, Mr. Pumpkin. How are you? You're very nice. Something happened that fucked her up. I don't know if this film did it, but she is damaged today, and I can only blame Oz.
I mean, I would imagine something happened between this movie and like The Craft, but I agree. Fairuza Balk as Dorothy is an intensely charming child. And I really appreciated also, you mentioned her politeness, the way that she never blamed anyone for her misfortunes or their shortcomings. I want to be more like Dorothy. Like when things would go wrong, she'd say things like, happens to people all the time. Or like when people really fucked up, she'd say like, it can't be helped now. It's very zen, very zen. By the way, to answer your question about TikTok, it is not a little person. It was a man who had to double over and walk around like that. So basically they strapped him down so his head was near his nuts. And he just walked around like that.
Oh, I'm sure that was comfortable.
The Gump crashes on a mountain, and Dorothy is briefly reunited with Scarecrow before he's turned into an ornament. The Gnome King gives each of the group 3 attempts to identify which ornament is Scarecrow. Failure turns Gump, Jack, and Tik-Tok into ornaments themselves. With her last guess, Dorothy turns a green gem into Scarecrow, then restores Jack and the Gump, enraging the Gnome King. The Gnome King attacks Dorothy's friends until Bellina lays an egg that fatally poisons him. Dorothy retrieves the ruby slippers from the Gnome King's remains and wishes for the group to return to a restored Emerald City.
Okay, so listeners out there, the blocks that Gene are giving you here of the plot, we break them down to normally like 5 blocks. That's basically what the movie gives you. They don't explain anything. They don't explain why the Gnome King is there, what his gripe with Emerald City is, where the Wheelers came from. There's no explanation of anything. So the only thing we know, we're now on a mountain. And the Gnome King is there, and the Gnome King's kind of pissed off, and he's going to play this game with them because she wants her friends back. She wants the Scarecrow. She knows that the Lion and the Tin Man, they're frozen in the city, and they're going to do an Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You have to go in there and pick which item I turned your friends into. The only member of this entire group that has any kind of brains and makes a plan is Tik-Tok. Tik-Tok uses his weakness, Gene, which you described. He goes in there, and in his 3 picks, he freezes. The Gnome King goes, okay, you can go in there and kind of wind him up. Goes in there, TikTok's like, hey, I just pretended. I'm going to let you watch me make a pick. That'll help your strategy. And then you'll be able to pick which I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. This is great. Dorothy now, she's going to show she's a smart young girl. She's got some spunk. She just blows it. Tik-Tok's like, okay, I'll touch that vase. Boom, he's gone. Dorothy has no plan. I wish that this little girl could have used some intuition or her memory of her love for the Scarecrow and just seen a little print on an object that would have helped her, like Indiana, find the cup of a carpenter and choose the wood cup. She finds it through blind luck.
I think the plan really went to shit because the Gnome King loves to flip the game on its head, though, because Tik-Tok, his plan sounded good. I thought what was going to happen is Dorothy would watch him pick incorrectly. When he did pick incorrectly, she would look to see what he was turned into, and he would turn into that thing on the spot. But that's not what happened. They fucked it all up because he was turned into an ornament somewhere else in the room. So she was unable to observe that ornament transformation pattern, right? And after that, I mean, she's pretty fucked. She had to just swirl around. Like, what do you want her to do? I mean, the Scarecrow was turned into a fucking emerald. How does she know that's the one that was the Scarecrow?
That was just, she closes her eyes.
Yeah.
She closes her eyes and walks around. But Gene, like, you just made me think of that scene. She is so accommodating. Not once does she say, you're a big, mean man hurting people. She's just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to die here. She's very accepting of her fate.
Well, the Gnome King did tell her that he was just going to throw her into a furnace, so she didn't really have much of a choice there. And Big D mentioned we don't know where the Gnome King came from, and that is true, but we do know a couple things about him, so we should give the movie some credit. It does establish that, you know, he's got this store of emeralds, and the emeralds were taken from him to the Emerald City, so he was very upset about that. And then when Dorothy's ruby slippers flew off and he got them, he was able to get all this magical power. So there are a couple details in there. It's about as detailed as like a Marvel origin story. But we don't get to see this guy until very late in the movie, which I kind of like. They kept him behind the curtain until the end, much like The Wizard of Oz. I was worried that he'd be a total letdown based on those shitty gnome faces we'd seen throughout the film, by far the weakest of the effects. But the Gnome King's actually pretty great. He's terrifically aloof. He's understandably bored because he's stuck in a fucking mountain. He makes some pretty good arguments, actually. Like, hey, if somebody takes something from you, don't you think they should give it back? Well, they took my emeralds and I want them back. He's just plain fun, and he's not afraid to wear ruby slippers. I'm really proud of him for that. And what other villain says things like, I beg your pardon? And has an egg allergy? This guy's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he kind of like pokes them out from under his stone robe, and then he pulls them back in like he's shy. You're right. And I understand. So he starts off as just a face on the rock. And with each of the victims that he turns into an ornament, he becomes more human. So I picked that up after a few of the gongs where the people were turned into ornaments, because he turns from like this claymation rock face to a sea captain that looks like he's covered in clay and smoking a pipe. That's what and I kept thinking, turn him into that sooner, because when he was in human form, I thought he was more charismatic. He looked more menacing because he looked like that friendly neighbor who would be like, hey, do you want to come over and play the new version of Zelda? And then you get downstairs and he starts talking to you about watching gladiator movies, and he's a bit creepy. He was a creepy dude. But Gene, for the podcast, I went back and I looked, because you mentioned his weakness is the egg. So I'm like, this has got to be something in lore that eggs, because everybody in Oz knows, oh, it's a chicken, there's going to be an egg. So in the book, Tik-Tok of Oz, where the gnomes are a major character, they have only two known weaknesses. Sunlight, because they're a nocturnal creature and they're vulnerable to sunlight like vampires, and also water. They have an aversion to water, and you contact with it, it'll disrupt their ability to render their powers useless, but no eggs. They don't explain it in the movie or in the books or in the lore. And I never knew this, folks. There's 14 books written between 1900 and 1920. This is like Harry Potter. And in none of them do they talk about eggs. And this is the point where somebody pauses the podcast and writes in and says, well, in the 1923, The Cowardly Lion of Oz by Ruth Plumley Thomas, they discuss the eggs, and it's an allergy. Folks, if that's in like one of these secondary books by other authors, fanfic, but tell me where the eggs come from.
I mean, eggs have water in them. It was probably a decision made because it was hard for Dorothy to carry around sunlight and water on her. If she just showed him like, oh shit, she's got a jug of water. Water? Oh no.
She just spit on him. You know? It's like we dealt with this in Gremlins, where they replicate if you get them wet. I saw them drinking. I saw them eating food with water in it before midnight.
As a person who's witnessed what happens when a person with egg allergies eats an egg, I felt this movie was pretty accurate.
But you're hyping up the Gnome King like he was yes, he's twisted, he's bored, but he is no like follow-up villain to the Wicked Witch of the West. She's got dark, powerful magic. She can cast spells, curses, enchantments. She can conjure fireballs, shoot flames. She's got some badass abilities. I mean, she shapeshifts. Then you got here a witty mountain who likes to play find the hidden object.
What? He can get gigantic. He can spew lava. He can turn people into ornaments. Big D, he turned an entire city to stone at will. At will. If he wanted to at any point, he could have just killed everyone by thinking it.
Yeah, but now if I'm an army, I just get an army full of chickens.
We have to get him to eat the egg, though.
Just throw the eggs. Halloween in New York, he'd be dead with all the kids throwing eggs. This gnome's got a major weakness. Or just keep your mouth shut.
The people of Oz ask Dorothy to be their queen, but she asks to return home. Princess Ozma, the girl from the sanitarium and rightful ruler of Oz, is freed and ascends the throne. Ozma sends Dorothy home, promising she can return if she wishes. Dorothy is found by her family on a riverbank in Kansas, and Aunt Em tells her that the clinic burned down. After returning home, Dorothy sees Bellina and Ozma through her bedroom mirror, but decides to keep Oz a secret. I want to take a moment to say fuck Auntie Em, because when Dorothy is discovered back in Kansas, Uncle Henry, who we learned had a broken leg but had recovered and was just chilling on the porch out of depression, I guess, he runs over. He's elated to see her. Fine. I didn't detect any reason for Dorothy to not like Uncle Henry. But then Aunt Em shows up, and she's got like a blanket. She's gleefully hugging Dorothy. Like she didn't just leave Dorothy overnight in a sanatorium with a mad scientist who was going to zap her brains out. Like if Aunt Em came anywhere near me, I'd kick her in the fucking pussy.
Yeah, but Gene, that's because the police are there. The police are going to raise questions. Auntie Em, she doesn't, first of all, she probably doesn't want kids. Dorothy's not theirs. They got stuck with her. They live in Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere. Tornadoes are tearing apart. You got a lazy husband who won't finish the house. She's got a miserable life. It's a sad life. I mean, I'm not saying she's great, but she was kind of hoping, just get back in the fields. Please make it to 18. You can marry somebody with money and take care of us, because otherwise we're going to die here. It's the only option living in Kansas. I mean, if I lived in Kansas, I'd probably want to go through shock therapy. It doesn't look happy. But in the beginning, I talked about the overall experience that Dorothy goes through, and we're left with the same question the original movie did. In The Wizard of Oz, you could see it like one of two ways. This is either a real physical journey that she's going to another place, Oz, that exists, or it's a metaphorical adventure that represents either personal growth or darker mental illness. And with the tone of this film, the setting, the sets, and the desperateness of what's going on in the Emerald City, I'm feeling, even though it's open to interpretation, that this film is telling us that this is a mental illness. This is something that's going on in her head. Because even at the end of the movie, you're thinking maybe if she had taken a journey, she's had a breakthrough, she's gone through some kind of trauma, she's now worked through it, she's realizing she's grown as a person, she sees the value of friends and love. But no, she sees Ozma in the mirror right at the very end, and she hides it. Does this mean, Gene, that she now has something, a mental illness that's going to continue? She's going to have breakdowns, hallucinations. That this is the rest of Dorothy's life.
I think you can see it in two ways. Like this is her saying farewell to that illusion or that delusion. But I sit squarely on the side that this is a mental issue of Dorothy's. Like this is not a real place. Much like Jacob's Ladder, I appreciate that Return to Oz clearly, to me, is entirely in Dorothy's head. There is no way, much like you said about the first movie, that the Gnome King just happened to be the same guy that was Dr. Worley, or that Tik-Tok happened to look like the electrotherapy machine, or that the Wheelers happened to be the same guys who were the sanatorium workers that wheeled her down the hall. Like, it's the same pattern as we're seeing in the original Wizard of Oz. It's a little girl's mental break, her coping mechanism, and I think that just makes it a better movie than if Oz were a real place that adults just didn't understand.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping it was some kind of a journey. Like Ozma was her older and she had come through some breakthrough.
I'll be honest, I took it to a much darker place.
Oh.
I thought that in this, she had actually gotten zapped until we saw the end. Like when we saw her on the riverbank, I'm like, oh, okay, she's okay. I thought she actually got zapped, and that was her expunging all these notions of Oz out of her head as they were putting electric current through her head. So
it could have been more just obscure and didn't give us an answer. If she had woken up and she no longer believed it happened, and then in her room, something like there's a glimmer or there's an emerald or there's another. She's
a spinning top.
Yes. But again, she sees fucking OZ in a key that the family has had for 100 years and used thousands of times. I think maybe I gotta go read all the final books, and even Glinda of Oz, the final book in 1920, to see if she ends up in a sanitarium with other people who believe they've been to Oz, and just a sad, lonely spinstress with lots of chickens and other animals and talking to rotting pumpkin heads. And it's a sad existence.
Maybe we just got to go see Wicked together. We're long overdue.
That was not on my list of things to do, but I'm open to anything after Rocky Horror Picture Show.
All right, now's the time of the podcast where we give our Shat scores for Return to Oz. The Shat scores are our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get our perspective. Butts, 0 wipes is traveling back to Oz and finding friends that are up to Big D's standards. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It is leaving a magical kingdom that is begging you to be queen, abandoning your friends, and casting aside your wish-granting shoes so you can return to being an orphan in 1899 Kansas. Big D, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Return to Oz?
So this is a hard one because normally we say, how does the movie hold up? So I'm going to break it down into a couple different ways. I think visually it stands up. It's original. It's beautiful. There was love and care put into it. The characters are unique. The art design I thought was exceptional. The performances, with the exception of the Wheelers, are pretty good. But does it hold up? No, you could never make this movie today. If you put this out for kids, there would be protests and picket signs because it's dark, it's scary. The tone is not appropriate for kids. Does it make a lot of sense? No, but it's right up there with the other things that kids watched in that time. The Dark Crystal, Legend, the Neverending Story. This was what was out there, and I think it does it better. I know you love Labyrinth. This felt like a better execution of that same idea, of a child going through some kind of mystical, magical journey and coming out changed on the other end. For me, I really was pleasantly surprised. I think it's a 1.25 white movie.
I'll admit that there are parts of this movie that just had me smiling, especially when the whole gang was on the Gump and it's just a fucking mess. And he's like, I'm not put together very well. I don't know if I can hold up and I don't know how to turn. And you just see Jack Pumpkinhead and Tik-Tok and Dorothy and Bellina the chicken and Gump. A lot of memorable characters just having a good ass time. This movie is scary. It is touching. It is creative. It is entertaining. And it really deserves more respect than it gets. I went into this movie like you, Big D, thinking that it was going to be TV movie quality, that it was going to be absolute trash. I was not enthused about watching it. It's much better than it gets credit for, but I can't say that it isn't flawed. The Wheelers,
awful.
They're just plain dumb. The hurdles that Dorothy overcomes, they earn a few eye rolls. When you think about it, she just kind of just walked into situations and happened to gump her way through it, right? Just plain dumb luck. And even the Gump and adorable Jack Pumpkinhead, they're really well-designed characters. They're so cute. They couldn't convince me that this is an elite film. And I think I make the break at 1 wipe. That's got to be an elite film. This is below that, but certainly better than average. I'm going with 2 wipes.
You're starting to make me question my scores here because I think maybe I am too liberal. I've tried not to be harsh.
I think your score is in a really good spot because I'll tell you, I had a really hard time with this one. I had to really, really do some soul searching on it because I wanted to go 1.5 wipes. But the more and more I thought about it, the more I just kind of got into the fact that there's not a lot of meat to this story. I was just kind of dazzled by a few characters that I really liked. And of course, the amount of creativity that it went into the design.
I mean, I think it's a brave film.
Yeah. Oh,
you try to follow up a classic so many years later with such a different tone. It would be like let's come up with a beloved film that had like everyone knows. I was going to say, Gone with the Wind, but what sequel would you do there? Yeah, okay. So
Quentin called The Wizard of Oz, actually.
Quentin Tarantino doing
Pulp Fiction 2,
Django Unchained as the sequel, like doing an interpretation of Gone with the Wind, the sequel. It's so different, and it's such a diversion from what the original one was. I think it was brave. Nobody would take this chance today.
So with 2 wipes from me, 1.25 wipes from Big D, that gives us an average wipe score of 1.625 wipes for Return to Oz.
So, Gene, with that unique score, that now ties us alone in the 109 spot. It is slightly better than Gremlins, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That feels wrong. War Games and The Natural, and slightly worse than Leon the Professional, Clue, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and Rocky Horror Picture Show.
What feels wrong?
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I remember we loved.
There was some.
Roger fucked it up. He gave it a 3. That's
yeah.
Anything with a heart, Roger. Love the guy. He still struggles with that, like, heart connection between people. It seems very alien to him.
Well, I think that condition has a name. Speaking of Roger, we did get some emails this week that I want to get to. The first one comes from Sean. He says, "Hey, everyone. I've been away for a while, and I'm just catching up on the episodes I missed. I just got through listening to Back to the Beach, and something occurred to me. With Roger gone, you no longer have a foil on the pod, which, in my opinion, is necessary. I hear Gene and Ash trying to make Big D the foil, but that's never going to work. He's too loved by the fan base. And again, in my opinion, I think that's why Ash has taken so much ire from some fans. To be clear, Ash isn't a foil either. Neither is Gene. They're both equally heroic, for lack of a better word, as Big D. You all bring a great positivity to the show. In my opinion, you need a fourth to balance things out. I say that because I can't imagine not having all 3 of you on the pod. I'm not suggesting that you bring Roger back because, well, reasons. I'm also not asking to join because that's not me. I'm just throwing out my unsolicited opinion. I still love listening to the podcast, and I'm still planning to commission more movies. It's actually Big D's fault that I was away. He mentioned Time Suck in an episode, and I got lured into that cult trying to get through that back catalog. Anyway, sorry for the long message. Keep up the great work. Sean.
Sean, glad that I could get you on to Dan Cummings' Time Suck. It's a great podcast. It's a good listen. Jim, we got another email also about Roger, so I think I'll bundle that one into this one if you don't mind. And this one came from Chops Around, and it said, "Hey, stumbled upon your podcast in late 2021. Have listened to 95-ish% of all the episodes, and I've listened to you from the beginning more than once. Love the progress, the growth, the passion, the hard work, and clearly gone into the podcast. Couple of ideas here. Bring back Roger very occasionally. Yes, he might not be everybody's cup of tea, but he's very entertaining. 2, get Gene's mate in very regularly because he's fucking hilarious. Had a few drinks, and I'm writing this, so I can't remember his name right now. I'm imagining King B. No, nothing. I reiterate, Roger occasionally and Gene's mate, something regulars." So if you've gone back and you've listened, I think on the Young Guns podcast is where I discuss it. I'm still very close to Roger. I see him. I call him. I travel with him. Love him. You can love somebody as a person. He makes me laugh. Him and I get along, very funny. And sometimes when I'm talking to him, I'm like, fuck, I miss it. What we had was magical. But there's some people you can't work with. The podcast, yes, it's great to sit and listen to, but you're hearing the final result of hours and hours and hours and hours of work. And it's hard when somebody just wants to be the foil and doesn't want to put in the work. And that's coming from somebody who loves Roger. I wish he had had the same dedication to the work as he did the fun on the air, because I think the 3 of us had something that was very special. And you just can't ever recreate that when somebody isn't helping pull along.
And on that note, Roger and I were very, very close friends, and this podcast ruined our friendship. I mean, it fell apart because of this. And Big D's absolutely right. It's sometimes you just can't work with a person. You have to make those decisions. I recently read a book about setting boundaries. And one of the things about setting boundaries is really interesting is people think that setting boundaries is a way to keep somebody at an arm's distance, right? Is a way to keep people from infringing on your life. But in fact, boundaries can be a way that you keep people in your life, right? You let them know that these are my boundaries and I want to enforce these boundaries because I want to continue being friends with you. And it's the same thing with the King Bee. If we held the King Bee is fucking hilarious. He's insanely intelligent. But if we kept him and held him to the expectations that we have of each other, that Big D and I have of each other, it would be impossible. Our friendship would fall apart because Big D and I are at times a bit stern with each other as far as expectations and carrying out responsibilities. But that's how this podcast gets out every week. That's how the website's always updated. That's how the money's always taken care of. That's how social media is always taken care of. All the little things that have to get done, like we have found over the years, the years that we've been doing this, that there's I can depend on him and he can depend on me. And that is just as important as the talent and the fun.
Yes, and it's the trust and the accountability. Yes, I love the fans, but there's times like when I'm late on an edit and I'm like, God damn it, I'm disappointing Gene. I need to get my ass back in gear, and it's one of the things that without a partner, not to be like, oh, I have such dedication to it. But since the very beginning, I think Gene and I have both taken it very serious. That if you're going to get commissions where people write in emotional memories of a film with a loved one, you got to put in the effort. You can't half-ass it. And Gene, thank you. Without you, we're going, I think August here will be 7 years.
Yeah, and over 330 episodes.
Most podcasts, I think, don't make it out of the first handful of episodes.
Yeah, 50. So. 50 is like the benchmark where if you make it past 50, you've really done something. And, you got 6 times that. So thanks to all of you. Next up, we have an email from Vinny in England about Event Horizon. He says, I just finished listening to Event Horizon again, and it leaves me with something I can't ignore. Gene, you raised a fair criticism of Event Horizon's characters being direct copies from Alien. I have no complaints about that, as long as you're not trying to give any credit to Ridley Scott. What a fucking hack that man is. Go seek out some of his interviews. He openly admits to remaking Jaws in space whilst copying the look of 2001 Space Odyssey. He admits Alien, for that reason, is fairly unoriginal. Event Horizon may be exactly as you described, but it did knock 98% of the boredom out of Alien. And if I'm being honest, Alien is about as scary as Naked Gun. That is probably why Blade Runner is less interesting than watching paint dry. I'm sure in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing and has read the source material, it could have made the film it should have been. And that comes from Vinny in England.
I mean, I think I hadn't thought of this before, but he's right. I'm getting like a George Lucas vibe from Ridley Scott, because I've seen some interviews where he tries to talk about the lore and the entire world building, and shit's been hit or miss. I mean, without James Cameron, I don't think Aliens is what it is today, because the movies that have come out since Prometheus and they're developing some new film also. It seems really uneven.
Well, Vinny wrote back again, this time about So I Married an Axe Murderer. He said, I listened to this episode today. Yes, Mike Myers is insufferable, but he is insufferable in everything, including Wayne's World. He's as funny in that as Galloping Knobbrot. In my humble opinion, Shrek is by a country mile the most entertaining thing Mike Myers has ever done. But that doesn't make that good either. I enjoyed Austin Powers at the time, but on more recent viewings, he's better but still insufferable and recycles everything. It's funny once, but by the end of the film, it leaves you cold. I can't imagine how I would feel if I watched all 3 of the films now, but regardless of how terrible the films may be, you 3 still make me laugh and bring joy to my otherwise monotonous working day. I feel guilty for not being able to commission a film myself. I have such a long list I want to hear you shit over. I think my first choice would be Brain Dead. It is one of Peter Jackson's first films, but please, if you ever watch it, don't take it seriously. It's the funniest zombie movie I've ever seen and should be seen as a comedy horror. If it wasn't so over the top, it might have been banned. Love you all. Still have so much more to say, but bye for now from the rainy southeast of England. And again, that's from Vinny. So, Vinny, I have not seen Brain Dead, but among my peers, it was a bit of a cult classic. So I should at some point check it out. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I loved Wayne's World. I feel like Wayne's World, perhaps it was Dana Carvey carrying things, balancing Mike Myers out. But that is a movie that is about as near perfect a comedy as I can imagine. I still quote it at least weekly, and I don't think Shrek is funnier.
I don't think it's a mystery as to why, once he separated from Dana Carvey, I think he became less funny. Dana Carvey balanced him out, and Dana Carvey seems like a really good dude who couldn't stand Mike Myers. So In Wayne's World, I think it works. If you just have a full dose of douchebag Mike Myers, it's too much. But when you like put the Dana Carvey loving wet blanket on top, it'll tamp it down. But yeah, I still thought Wayne's World was great.
Vinny, although I disagree on the Wayne's World thing, I think your observations on Alien and Event Horizon and Mike Myers movies are all spot on. So please keep writing back in at host@shatthemovies.com or leave us a voicemail by going to shatpod.com and use the SpeakPipe feature. We always love to hear those English accents, and we hope that you write or call back again soon. Well, that's it for email. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week, I'm hoping the commissioner calls in. Because, our commissioner who commissioned this did his 6-month to rad. It's the same one. It's Frank.
Oh, shit.
Frank, this is a big one. You called and you said, hey, you 6 months to this movie, but you haven't called back since. Police officer Ray Tango and Gabe Cash are narcotics experts working to bring down a drug lord. In an attempt to stymie their efforts, the drug lord sets up Tango and Cash, making it as if they had killed the FBI agent. Arrested and put in prison, the two cops formulate an escape plan, and once out, they team up with Tango's exotic dancer sister, Kathleen, played by Terry Hatcher, in order to clear the record and take down the drug dealer once and for all. Commissioned by Frank. Came out in 1989. Man, this is one of those 80s films that's long overdue.
Dude, when you put together Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell, Jack Palance, and Terry Hatcher, and you rake in $120 million of 80s box office dough, you know that you got a movie worthy of this podcast, and no person other than Frank F. could bring it to us.
The amount of explosions alone in this film, and monster trucks and greased up guys on steroids and half naked ladies. This is what this podcast was made for.
Well, thank you, Frank, for commissioning our upcoming film. And thank you, David, for commissioning Return to Oz. Thank you to all our commissioners who make this podcast possible. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at ShatTheMovies. Email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
I'll tell you one thing. Whoever set us up is really connected.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Relax. Soak. And don't flatter yourself.
Meet Ray Tango. He likes money.
Easy come, easy go.
But doesn't bother with cash. Meet Gabe Cash. He won't dance around trouble and doesn't mind stepping on toes.
I hate you karate guys.
Two of LA's top rival cops are having a tough time staying in rhythm.
You know me, huh?
Yeah, I hear you're the second best cop in LA.
That's funny. I hear the same thing about you.
But they're going to have to work together, even if it kills them.
Like now!
We'll take it.
No,
That's one of a kind.
we won't put a scratch on it. Did you sleep with my sister?
I was so drunk, I don't remember, okay?
Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. Tango and Cash.